Shalom Uvracha from Yerushalayim, Ir HaKodesh. With the help of Hashem, we continue this evening our joint study of the ethics of the fathers, of Pirkei Avot. We began last week chapter 2, Mishnah 10. I mentioned last week that there are several ways to number the Mishnayot, and you have to make sure you're following the same Mishnah. Not all texts have it as Mishnah 10. We are studying about the 5 special students of Rabban Yohanan ben Zakkai. Last week we had part 1 of chapter 2, Mishnah 10, and tonight, with the help of God, this is chapter 2, Mishnah 10, part 2. The Mishnah lists 5 outstanding Talmidim. Chamisha Talmidim Hayu lo l'Rabban Yohanan ben Zakkai. It goes without saying, as we mentioned last week, of course he didn't have only 5 students. He had numerous students. But these were the 5 most prominent, most outstanding students of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Last week we discussed the first of them on the list. That's Rabbi Eliezer ben Hurkanus. And tonight's discussion will focus on the second of the list of 5. The rabbi's name, Rabbi Yehoshua ben Hananiah. Rabbi Yehoshua ben Hananiah, one of the great students of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Whenever we encounter in Mishnaic literature, in Tanaitic literature, Rabbi Yehoshua, we are talking about Rabbi Yehoshua ben Hananiah, the focus of our discussion this evening. Unless otherwise indicated, it's always Stam Rabbi Yehoshua is Rabbi Yehoshua ben Hananiah. Rabbi Yehoshua was a Levi, a great Levi. He's mentioned as one of the people who sang in the Beit HaMikdash, a person who glorified God through his singing, as did many of the Leviim. Unfortunately, Rabbi Yehoshua, he was not wealthy. He suffered poverty. As you know, the great rabbis did not receive, generally speaking, salaries for their teachings, and many of them worked. He worked as a blacksmith, which was not considered one of the most noble of labors. One source talks about him as a needle maker, and a blacksmith, and the Rabbi Yehoshua nevertheless reached, some of the highest levels of spiritual accomplishment. We do have both types of examples in our literature about rabbis who were extremely wealthy, rabbis who were extremely poor, and I think one of the messages is that that's not necessarily the criterion, either one way or the other, in terms of the level that a person can accomplish. Rabbi Yehoshua ben Hananiah reaches one of the highest levels of accomplishment. And his career in Torah, his career in connection to Torah, begins at a very, very young age. For we have a tradition about his mother. I don't know if it's said about any other mother of any other rabbi. Could be it is, but I'm not familiar. In Talmud Yerushalmi, in Masechet Yevamot, Perek Gimel Halacha Aleph, in the 3rd chapter of Yevamot in the Talmud Yerushalmi, we read about his mother taking him as an infant to absorb the words of Torah. Now, to many people, what does an infant understand? What's the purpose of bringing an infant to Torah classes? The infant. And today, maybe there are studies about music, about how much a child perhaps can even absorb, even at a young age, even subconsciously. But this seems to have been the great practice of Rabbi Yehoshua's mother. I remember when Rav Shneimson Zatzal, when the Lubavitcher Rebbe enacted. I don't know if it was his idea or he had it from previous rabbis. I think it was his own idea. I'm not sure. He had this notion that in the Lubavitch community, it's a sight to behold for anyone that has not seen it. On Shavuot, the Rav Schneerson said, the Lubavitch Rebbe said he wants everyone to go to the shul. He wants everyone to go to the Beit Knesset. He wants everyone to go to the Beit Midrash. Everybody should go to the synagogue and listen to Aseret HaDibarot, Aseret HaDivarim. Just as at the Sinaitic revelation at Sinai, it wasn't only the older people, it wasn't only the men and women, it was the children and the infants. And therefore, take all the infants, take all the babies, and go to shul. And Baruch Hashem had the zchut of praying more than once. More than once. I had the zchut of praying with Lubavitch. I said a bracha beforehand. All the people think I'm drinking without a bracha. No, before the. So I've gone to Lubavitch Minyanim. I've gone to Lubavitch Minyanim. It's so beautiful. You have scores and scores of newborn infants in carriages, and mothers holding babies and children running all over the place, hundreds and hundreds, for Hashem, thousands, I hope, tens of thousands, hundreds of young children listening to the Ten Commandments. Now, it's extremely difficult to read the Ten Commandments with such musical accompaniment, but it requires great skills. And someone, perhaps defiantly, one person wrote or said to the Lubavitcher Rebbe, what's the purpose of taking the infants to hear the Ten Commandments? They should go hear the Aseret HaDibarot. He said to the Rabbi, he said, do you think they really understand the Ten Commandments? I guess he had a sense of humor, and he was. So the Rebbe turned to him and said, "Excuse me, and do you think you understand the Ten Commandments?" So Rabbi Yeshua's mother, Rabbi Yeshua ben Chananiah's mother. We have a testimony of Rabbi Dosa in Masechet Yevamot in the Yerushalmi. He says, "Zachurani." So I remember, Shahayita imo, that the mother of Rabbi Yehoshua, Molicha Arisato, Levet HaKnesset. I remember her bringing in the carriage, into the synagogue. His crib, in came into the shul, Bishvil, Sheyitdabeku Oznav B'divrei Torah. It's beautiful words, especially when you study about Rabbi Yehoshua's accomplishments in the world of Torah. This is like an early childhood experience. I recall, says Rabbi Dosa, how Rabbi Yehoshua's mother would bring him in his carriage, his crib, into the synagogue, into the Beit Knesset, so that his ears should absorb the words of Torah. One can imagine how great is the level of a rabbi, such as Rabbi Yehoshua ben Chananiah, who was exposed to Torah from such an early age. This could be an inspiration, I think, to many people who want children at least as great as Rabbi Yehoshua ben Chananiah. Yeah, maybe there's room to bring them to Torah classes, not just to the synagogue. Here it says Beit Knesset. Beit Knesset generally is connected to prayer. Here it says Beit Knesset to Divrei Torah. Imagine taking a child into a shiur klali, in a large yeshiva. The chief rabbi is lecturing. What is the student, and the baby is sleeping there, or the mother or the father is shaking the baby as the rabbi is teaching. Maybe that's the lesson of Rabbi Yeshua ben Chananiah. Rashi, in his commentary to Pirkei Avot, has a different tradition and a slightly different take on the praiseworthy actions of the mother of Rabbi Yehoshua. According to Rashi's tradition, I think I once read a story, maybe someone remembers the name of the rabbi, I don't remember. The way I remember reading it was that someone, Baruch Hashem, was blessed with the birth of a child, and shortly after the birth, approached one of the rabbis and said, "From what age should I start, praying for my child's success in religiosity and Torah?" I said, "Well, maybe you're at least 9 months too late. Like maybe you should have started praying at conception." According to Rashi's tradition, Rabbi Yoshua ben Chananya did not wait until he was born, but he didn't go around. She didn't go around with him as a baby. She did so, says Rashi, when he still was in the womb. She did not bring him, according to what Rashi writes, to the synagogue in order for him to absorb and hear the words of Torah. She did so. She went around all the study halls while she was pregnant, and she asked the rabbis to pray that her baby should be a chacham. Here's a source, a very early source, like to go for berachot, while the woman was pregnant, and ask the rabbi, to bless the child in the language of Rashi, seemingly quoting the Yerushalmi, but it's not in our versions of Yerushalmi. This is how Rashi puts it: "Vani shamati shekol hayamim sheibarto imo," for all of the days that Yehoshua, Rabbi Yoshua ben Chananya's mother, was pregnant with him, hayita mechazeret b'chol yom al samach daled and at batei midrashot. She walk around to all the study halls. It's nice, right? Maybe some people are like, where would you go? You go to your Rebbe's Beit Midrash. Maybe she had this all-encompassing idea. Let's go to this Beit Midrash, that Beit Midrash, this Rav, that Rebbe, this Chacham. And she would say, Shahayu Ba'ir, all of the study halls, all of the yeshivot that were in the city, Va'omeret lahem, B'vakasha miken, please, Bakashu rachamim al ha'ubar hazeh, she'yeh chacham. Could you please bless my baby please bless this fetus to become a chacham. And Rabbi Yehoshua indeed became one of those great chachamim, one of the outstanding students of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, an outstanding sage, not only in that which we ordinarily refer to as Torah, but he developed an all-encompassing knowledge, and he was able to use his Torah knowledge in all areas of life, to the extent that his wisdom included areas which many people were not experts at. They did not develop an expertise in those fields. We find him speaking with philosophers in Talmudic literature, in Midrashic literature. He was an expert in science, and he was recognized even by the non-Jews of his times as an outstanding chacham, his mother's wish. He was an expert in many, many disciplines, but he had special levels of expertise in astronomy. We find him in serious discussions, dialogue, debates with many non-believers, and helping or guiding them to get closer and closer to an understanding and to a belief, to a connection to the Creator. Rabbi Yehoshua is the one who teaches in Sanhedrin, if you look at Sanhedrin 105a, okay, about the role of the non-Jews in the world to come as well. He seems to understand that Olam Haba is not limited only to the Jewish people, but that the righteous Gentiles do have a section in Olam Haba as well. Rabbi Yehoshua had a great understanding of levels of poverty. In the Gemara, there's a discussion about how even some of his teachers, some of his colleagues, were not necessarily aware of how poor he was. And he's the one who teaches in the Midrash, in Vayikra Rabbah, Parsha Lamedalet. Parsha Lamedalet has many, many teachings in Vayikra Rabbah about the poor. I once heard a mnemonic. Lamedalet is, of course, Dal. So you want to look at Parsha Dal of Vayikra Rabbah. There are numerous teachings there about about the poor. And one of the teachings is the teaching of Rabbi Yoshua. Rabbi Yoshua teaches, Yoter mimah shebal habayit oseh im he'ani oseh im bal habayit. Rabbi Yoshua, perhaps living this life of a struggling poor person, maybe was trying to encourage poor people. And he said that more than the philanthropists are doing for the poor are doing for the philanthropists. And maybe this would bring extra levels of dignity. You see, if a poor person feels that all they're doing is receiving, then maybe it's very, very difficult. But if maybe Rabbi Yehoshua's words, besides being objectively correct, this is a great encouragement for the poor people, that this could help restore levels of dignity even to those whose life situation required them to accept donations. For me, one of the most impressive texts about the greatness of Rabbi Yehoshua is the text which we read in the Midrash Shir HaShirim Rabbi, Parsha Aleph, towards the very beginning of the Midrash on Shir HaShirim. And there we read about Rabbi Yehoshua's relationship with the rabbi that we spent last week's discussion, dealing with the great levels of Rabbi Eliezer. Now, our Mishnah is clearly teaching that they were colleagues, Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yehoshua. They are fellow students of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. However, if you read the Midrash, listen carefully to the great level of respect that Rabbi Yehoshua demonstrates in his honor that he is giving, in his derech eretz for Rabbi Eliezer. Most people studying Talmud, most Talmudic students are familiar with, all throughout Shas, Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yoshua, Rabbi Yoshua, Rabbi Eliezer. Many machlokot, many disputes, numerous disputes between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yoshua. But it's so important to understand that despite all that, there's such a great level of respect as is exhibited by Rabbi Yoshua. The teaching reads as follows. Beit Midrasho shel Rabbi Eliezer. In the Beit Midrash of Rabbi Eliezer, there was this one place, this one designated area. This Even Achat Hayita Sham. It was a special place of distinction, one special area of stone. V'hayita miyuchedet lo liyeshiva. And this was the place where Rabbi Eliezer would sit. It was upon this stone that Rabbi Eliezer, this specially designated place for Rabbi Eliezer. Hamahat, says the Midrash, nichnas Rabbi Yoshua. One time Rabbi Yoshua walked into the study hall of Rabbi Eliezer. Hitchil noshek otah ha'even. And he started kissing the stone. The stone which was the seat of Rabbi Eliezer. V'amar, ha'even hazot doma lahar Sinai. This stone, this seat, is to me like Mount Sinai. This is the place of the revelation. He's talking about Rabbi Eliezer. If you don't know this, if you ever hear the way they argue, you don't believe this, right? Even hazot doma lahar Sinai. It's very important to know this because some people, many sections of the Talmud, at least 4 different places, the conclusion of many tractates is about Talmidei Chachamim, Marbim Shalom Ba'olam. The Torah sages increase shalom. And I read more than once in more than one commentary. Why did they put this at the end of so many of the tractates? And precisely because if someone reads through a tractate of Talmud and they hear the rabbis arguing with each other on all the pages almost, so they feel, they didn't get along with each other. There was no shalom. There was constant divisiveness. And the point of saying Talmidei Chachamim Marbim Shalom Ba'olam was no. There was a discussion, sometimes heated discussion, sometimes very heated discussions, but they loved each other and they respected each other. Marbim shalom ba'olam. It was great mutual love. The Gemara discusses in one place about Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai and others. So he kisses the stone. V'eben hazot doma lahar Sinai. V'zeh she'ashav aleha. And the person who sat on this place, domeh la'aron haberit, is on the level of the Ark of the Covenant, the level of the Ark that contains within it the Ten Commandments, with such great levels of respect for his esteemed colleague. It's only part of the greatness of Rabbi Yehoshua. He was so wise and so pious that we learn at the end of Masechet Sotah, Perek Tet, Mishnah Tetvav, Mishemet Rabbi Yehoshua, when Rabbi Yehoshua left this world, Pasaka Tova Min Ha'olam, certain levels of goodness left this world. Goodness departed from this world. Rabbi Yehoshua's departure left such a void. Rabbi Yehoshua was the epitome of the great level of Tova. And we only began to discuss his life. We have only started speaking about his greatness. For the discussions about Rabbi Yehoshua would continue many weeks. We're trying to limit it to try to complete this Mishnah. To learn about the select students of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, I do hope, Bezrat Hashem, in our next study session to continue with insights into the next three students mentioned, Rabbi Yosef Kohen, Rabbi Shimon ben Netanel, and Rabbi Elazar ben Arach. Each one a great world of outstanding accomplishments. May we understand the levels of the five students of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai and learn the appropriate messages from each of them. Thank you so much for listening. Shalom.